Hello everybody, I'm Jody Williams with BMI, and we have a treat for you today. We're going to talk with my friend and BMI Icon, Steve Cropper. Steve, you're being celebrated as a BMI Icon at our Country Awards, and you know you've had such a great influence on classic R&B and soul music, and your original inspirations were the Grand Ole Opry and Black Gospel. Talk to me about that music that first influenced you.
Well, you know, I was born and raised in Missouri.
Okay.
So musically, Missouri had the same music that Kentucky did. Kentucky, you know, nailed it and gave it a name and made it famous. Not that Missouri didn't make their music famous, but they didn't call it Missouri Bluegrass. They just called it, you know, whatever it was. So I grew up on that and had a lot of influence with that, I guess, as a young guy. But when I went to Memphis for the first time, I was about 10 years old. When I turned on the radio, there was a gospel program on. And it blew me away.
So in Memphis, you obviously were drawn to music, and then later on in high school, the beginnings of the Marquees were forming. Can you talk a little bit about that? How that happened, and how you sort of how that morphed into the whole Stax thing?
Well, there's a good reason, because the sax player's mom was one of the co-owners. She was the Axton of Sturt, S-T-A-X, Sturt and Axton. And that's how that all got started, basically. But I did start a band in high school with another guitar player, just two of us. And a friend of ours said, "Man, you guys are pretty good. I'm friends with this DJ, and he really should hear you play, because he hosts these sock hops every weekend." So he takes us down to his radio show, and he says, "Hey, just go out there and play something." And we did, and he said, "I can hear you in the studio." I had a little small studio. And what he did that night, he put us on the air, and a lot of people called in and said, "Hey, those guys are pretty good." So he called us into the booth and said, "Is this all you got? Just two of you? You have a whole band? If you have a whole band, or a drummer or bass player, I'll put you on one of my sock hops." Wow. The next day, what we were doing, looking for a bass player or drummer. And went over school and didn't have a lot of luck, but we did find one kid that played drums. He was in the 9th grade at the time, so a little young, but anyway. His dad had a country band that he sang in all the time and worked on weekends and all that. So he was 100% behind his son playing drums in a band. So we would rehearse in their den, and that's how it all got started. The reason the Marquees made it, we made it with a hit record, but the reason we really did make it was because we played nothing but dance songs. And so when we were in the 11th grade, we were playing senior proms all over town.
Yeah. Wow.
Because nobody could afford the real artists, so they'd get us and we'd duplicate the songs.
How did the Marquees morph into Booker T and the EMGs? And how did you make a lot of records with that rhythm section before you were actually called Booker T and the EMGs?
So what we decided was, when Booker T and the EMGs was formed, the Marquees were still out on the road promoting Last Night, the song Last Night, because it was number 3 in the world, so they were out there working all the time. So they were out there for a couple of years while Booker T and the EMGs were doing their thing. So historically, in '61, we had Last Night. In '62, we had Green Onions, which went to number 1 in the world. All the charts, it was number 1. It was number 1 in England, and number 1 everywhere. So that's how they got started.
Wow.
So record-wise, the company decided we really need a Marquees album. So what we did, we took the rhythm section and added the horns and called it the Marquees.
Wow.
So it really was Booker T and the EMGs with horns is what basically was on that second album, whatever.
Okay. So with the backdrop of the civil rights movement in Memphis in the mid-'60s, what was it like on the inside of Stax Records? Some of your pals described it as an oasis.
That's a good way to put it. I always said it's sort of like when you went to Stax. When you walked through those doors, it was sort of like going to church in those days. It just gave you a perspective of being really safe, and if you had problems or whatever, you left them outside. Now, you may have joined them again when you got off that afternoon and took them home or whatever, but everybody at Stax inside the building was for one reason, that was to get a hit record.
Wow.
That's what's neat about it. They worked as a team.
Would people just come up and knock on the door and say, "Will you hear me?" And every now and then
listen to me.
you'd have
Listen to what I got. Listen
Yeah.
to me. I've got a hit song. Listen to me.
Yeah.
And once 100 people do that, it becomes sort of complacent, I guess.
Yeah, I got you.
And but Otis Redding started that way, and he kept bugging Al Jackson, our drummer, that day. He was we were in there cutting Johnny Jenkins and the Pine Toppers, trying to come up with a follow-up record. They had a hit record previous to that called Love Twist, and they were having difficulties getting a follow-up. And they thought, well, let's take them to, their manager said, let's take them to Stax, because they're really well known for instrumentals.
Right.
We'd had 4 or 5 under our belt, so that's what we were doing. And Otis Redding was the lead singer of that band. I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
I just thought he was the driver because he drove the car up there. That's what I thought. He kept bugging Al Jackson, and Al says, I don't know if Steve can listen to you or not, because he holds auditions on Saturdays. He's the A&R director, yes, but this is like whatever day of the week it was, a Tuesday or Wednesday.
Right.
So finally Al came to me, and we're back listening. Jim Stewart had sent the band home, Jim Stewart being the owner and the engineer at the time. And he said, okay, guys, let's cut it off, and we'll come back tomorrow and try again, And so Al Jackson, we're listening to playbacks of the day, and Al came up and said, that guy that I asked you about earlier, he's still bugging me. Can you take 5 seconds to listen to this guy and get him off my back, basically? That wasn't hard to do, but I said, okay, I'll go down there, tell him to come down to the piano. And so this big tall guy comes down there, and I had seen him earlier in the day when he drove up. And I said, okay, here's the piano, sing something. He said, I don't play piano. I play a little guitar, I don't play piano. And he said, can you play some of them church chords? And it's just 6/8 triplets musically. And I said, this? And he said, yeah. And he started singing These Arms Are Mine. I just cut him off. He said, you don't like it? And I said, no, I love it. Just hang right there. I ran up to Jim Stewart, and I said, Jim, just stop whatever you're doing. You got to hear this guy's voice. And he thought I was nuts, basically.
Yeah.
But I convinced him to come listen to him. He did, and the next thing he said, get the band back together. We got to put this down on tape.
Wow.
And it was These Arms Are Mine. And from that song on, that was Otis's first record. The next day, instead of cutting Johnny Jenkins and the Pine Toppers, we were trying to get a B-side for These Arms Are Mine. So he had 17 hits in a row, counting that one. But,
can you talk a little bit about the writing of Sitting on the Dock of the Bay?
Well, that one was kind of easy. I wrote a lot of songs with Otis prior to that, but he called me from the airport. He had his own plane. He flew in, and he went to the nearest phone booth and called me to make sure I was at the studio. He said, oh, I don't need to tell you anything. He said, I just want to make sure you're there because I'm coming right down. I've got a hit. And he walked in, he said, get out your guitar, get out your guitar. And he did, or I did, and we went in the studio, and he sang me the first verse, like he always had 12, 15 ideas, just starts and titles, and that's it, and I'd help him finish them. And as that song I did, and I helped him finish the second verse, and wrote the bridge, and finished the third verse with him. And everybody asked me about the whistling, and I have told that story because on an Otis Redding session, you didn't write fade-outs. You just expected he was going to come up with something. A lot of times he'd come up with a new song. And Al Jackson, our drummer, sometimes would say, why don't we just start there? Like at the ending, because that ending is grooving. He always did that. So in this particular instance, when we cut it, he couldn't, I guess we didn't have anything, and he didn't know what to do. He started whistling. But he didn't whistle all that great. And the engineer told him that. There's some outtakes of the engineer saying, Otis, something about you'll never be a whistler or something like that. Otis showed him on the very next take. That was it. That was the one.
Wow.
I do it live, and people think I whistled on a record. Well, I can whistle. I've been whistling since I was younger than old enough to pucker my lips, I guess. And he did it. He did it great, and there's the record.
Wow. And the Seagulls.
Well, that was his idea. So there's some more outtakes of the same session where he's trying to do seagull sounds. And I always said he sounds like a dying crow. So anyway, that's where I got the idea. And Otis and I really knew we had something. And after the sessions each day, we'd always pull that out and listen to it again. Wow. It was just automatic. So get out that dock of the bay, let's listen to it again. We knew it wasn't finished. So he and I had agreed that it probably needed backgrounds to fill it out. Not strings and not horns, but horns were on it live anyway. But we thought backgrounds, and I said, Otis, if you don't mind waiting a couple of weeks, I'm going to record the Staple Singers. That's my next artist to do. I know without even asking them, they'd be more than happy to sing on your record. Well, of course, he passed away that weekend later. And then we get a call from New York saying, what have you got ready? We got to get an Otis Redding record out. And Jim comes to me and tells me, and I said, Jim, we don't have anything finished. And the only song that I knew that I thought potentially could be a big record was Dock of the Bay, but it wasn't finished. So that's when I got the idea to do the Seagulls and the Waves based on what Otis had done.
Yeah, wow. Back to songwriting. When you collaborated with Otis Redding or Wilson Pickett or whoever you might be writing with, how do you approach songwriting? Did you always were you the leader, or were you the glue and the person who kept it on the road?
Well, I don't know how you would describe it, but I do know what we were doing. Yes, we were writing songs, but it was about the song, not necessarily, it might have been about the music, but not the notes of the music so much.
I see.
And what we were doing was writing dance music. If you couldn't dance to it, we didn't finish it, just throw it out. If it was a song, a song, whether it was a ballad or whatever it was, if it was that, it didn't get the attention that something that had a beat to it that people could dance to. And because we came up in that era, the late 50s and early 60s was all about dance music.
Yeah.
The dance TV shows.
Oh, sure.
American Band. We all grew up on American Bandstand, those kind of places. And then they later had Soul Train and those TV shows. And it was all about dance.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily, it was about singing and talent, but it wasn't about music necessarily. Until Curtis Mayfield came along and blew everybody away playing guitar. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You've had a long relationship with BMI. Can you describe that relationship?
Well, I can't say enough good things about BMI because they were always there if I needed anything. The lucky part is I didn't need a lot, but every now and then if I needed some kind of support, they were always there. And so I've gone through a lot of phases with BMI from the very early 60s till now.
Well, that's great. Your music is at the cornerstone of what we're all about. So we're very proud to continue to represent you, and we'll go on down the road doing it. So, Steve, thank you so much.
All right, Jody. Thank you.
Appreciate your
God
time.
bless you, man.